Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's webcast, Introduction to the AutoCAD MEP Toolset. Our presenter today is Brett Barkman. He's a Solutions Engineer with Hagerman & Company. We're also joined on the line by Rick France. He's also a Solutions Engineer with Hagerman. He'll be joining us to answer questions that you might have as we go. I'll let you know that you're in listening only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the question panel located on the right-hand side of your screen, and they will be addressed some throughout by Rick, and at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. As we close down the session today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey, and we ask that you take a few moments to fill that out for us. This webcast does qualify for one AIA continuing education credit. If you would like to receive this credit, you can leave your AIA number in question 4 of our survey. Additionally, all registrants will receive a follow-up email containing a link for the recording of this presentation probably tomorrow. And with that, I'll hand things over to Brett.
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're here today to give you an overview of the AutoCAD MEP toolset. So let's go ahead and get started. We won't get into any deep detail here, but you will get a good overview and how it might benefit you if you feel like you're doing too much work in native AutoCAD. This webcast is focused on those of you who currently use AutoCAD by itself, but your work involves designing things like HVAC systems, electrical conduit, maybe you're doing some plumbing design, etc., things for a building. And mainly you're doing those in 2D, that's the scenario, or possibly you're using the 3D features to create extrusions and things like that, but you're still using native AutoCAD to do it. If that's the case, then this is for you. If you're already using the MEP toolset, you probably won't get much out of this one because it is just an overview. Let's take a quick look at what's changed in the AutoCAD product as a whole and what that means to your license. Before this change, you purchased a license of AutoCAD. Then, if you wanted to use, for example, AutoCAD Electrical for ladder diagrams, you had to purchase another license. Then if you wanted to use MEP or Plant 3D or architecture, etc., you had to purchase a license for each of those as well. In the past, we referred to those as verticals to AutoCAD. Now, when you purchase or renew AutoCAD on subscription, you get access to AutoCAD plus the verticals under one license, and you download only what you need to use. What used to be known as a vertical is now referred to as a toolset. In today's presentation, you'll see AutoCAD with the MEP toolset on top of it, but we still call it AutoCAD MEP like before. After Autodesk made this change, we received a lot of questions about how to download and install AutoCAD with these toolsets, so I'd like to just touch on that. For those of you who don't know about this, this should be a big help for you. If you are aware of this, then it should serve as a nice review. To access any of the products you're entitled to under your license, you'll log into your Autodesk account on the web. The web address is manage.autodesk.com. On the Products and Services tab, you'll see your software listed down the middle. On the right side, you might see a notification with a green bar at the top. That's a reminder that you can set your preferred method for downloading. That reminder is pointing to the Settings button. And when you want to get rid of that, you'll click on Got It. Then you'll click on the Settings button and take a look at the download preferences here. The one you want to set is Download Now, and then save it. The reason I'm pointing this out to you is because occasionally we receive support calls from customers who have had trouble with the Install Now option, which is the original default. When we had those folks switch to Download Now, their products installed without issue. So I wanted to show this to you. so that you can go ahead and set your account to use the Download Now option by default. That way, next time you need to download software, you won't have to worry about it giving you errors when you perform the install. When you're actually ready to download, you'll find your product in the list. Here we go to AutoCAD MEP and click on its download button on the right. You don't have to download AutoCAD and then download the toolset, so just go after the toolset you're interested in. Then you'll choose your version, whether it's Win64 or Win32, and the language. Notice that an older version is shown here, which means you have access to the previous versions. Also notice that the big blue button says Download Now already. That's what you want. Once you click on that, the product will begin downloading. I'd also like to point out that if you want to change the download method on the fly, you can click View All, which is right underneath that big blue button. For more information on moving around your Autodesk account, you can watch one of the previously recorded webcasts. It's called What's New in AutoCAD 2019. There's some other aspects of the account page that are covered there. This is also available on our Hagerman YouTube page. And when we reach the end of this webcast, I'll provide a link to that page for you. All right, let's take a look at AutoCAD MEP. The interface is going to look familiar to you if you're used to using AutoCAD, since it is built on top of that. Now, when we start working with drawings in AutoCAD MEP, we do that by first opening a project. And this was highlighted in last week's webcast on the architecture toolset. So those features also work on the MEP toolset. So first we open up a project, and then we'll use the project navigator to move in and out of the drawings on the MEP side as well. So today we're going to look at some of the HVAC and electrical drawings that are in the project navigator here. So I'll go ahead and open one of those up. We've already got a project underway here. The building that you're seeing in the background was highlighted in last week's webcast, so it was done with the architecture toolset, and we can leverage that here while we need to do things like route duct, conduit, cable tray, and the other elements that we're going to need. Let's take a quick look at this in 3D. Although the model itself is done in 3D, for those of you that are used to working in 2D fashion, you can still do that. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. First, I just wanted to take a bird's eye view of this drawing and the area that we're going to work on. This is the area we're going to add some duct to. As you can see, the drawing has some air terminals, diffusers, return registers, things like that. There's also some duct already in place, and we're just going to continue on. So before I start routing duct here, I'm going to hide a few elements because I want to make sure that I don't route duct to the wrong element at the wrong time. So I'll just use the hide tools that are in AutoCAD for that. Now to start routing duct, all you have to do is select on a piece of equipment and then use one of the plus signs that you see to start adding duct. We can also add flex duct. So I'm going to choose on Add Duct. Over in Properties, you'll have access to the size of the duct, the shape, the type of system that it needs to be, and so on. I'm going to choose round here, and then we'll choose a diameter from the list. You could key that in if you want. And then I'm ready to start routing just by clicking points out in the drawing. This is the same amount of work as drawing a line in 2D AutoCAD. The difference is this is going to be full-blown duct when you're finished. So here's what I have to start with. AutoCAD MEP knows when I turn the corner to add the appropriate piece of duct to make the round. If I want to change that to a T, for example, I can do that simply by clicking on one of the plus signs again, and then drag the cursor in the direction I want that to go. and MEP knows to swap that out for a T. I didn't have to do anything else. Also, we can stretch the duct just like we would a line with the length and grips. And if you're using dynamic input, which is a feature of native AutoCAD, dynamic input will allow you to enter specific distances for your duct. I can also select a piece of duct that's already there. I can change its shape. I can change its diameter on the fly. So here I'll reduce the size of this. We'll go with 18 inches on this one. Once I do that, the software knows that I'm going to need a transition, and it prompts me to pick one from the list. So I'll go ahead and do that. And the software takes care of the rest. So you can see there, all I did was change the size from properties, and AutoCAD MEP added the necessary transition for me. Down here, I've got a transition that was added when I first started routing, but I'm going to change that to a different one. I don't really like that one there, so I'm going to use a different one. To swap that out, all I have to do is double click on the display for that component over in Properties, and then I can change from the round to rectangular duct to one I want to use, which is the round to rectangular angle duct in this case. Again, there's plenty of sizes to choose from in the catalog. So I'll pick the one I want. And there you go. Now, MEP did place a piece of duct right here in between that VAV box and the transition. I'm going to pretend I don't want that there, and I want the transition to be the first piece. So I'm just going to delete that piece and then select the transition and use one of the move grips to connect it back to the VAV box, and the software takes care of the rest. So as you can see, so far I haven't had to type in any commands on the command line. I haven't had to go to the ribbon and hunt for a button. I haven't even had to go to the tool palettes yet in order to route duct. All I had to do was click on a plus sign and start routing. Using that method, I'm going to continue on and add some flex duct out to the air terminals here. So I'll click on this open end here. This time, I'm going to add flex duct. I'm also going to change the diameter to something smaller. This time I'll go with 10 inches. And now all I have to do is connect it to the air terminal. Again, since I changed the size, I'm prompted to choose a transition from the list, so I'll do that. The software takes care of the rest. While this command is still active, in order to hook up the rest of those air terminals, all I have to do is pick on the duct and pick the air terminal. Then pick the duct and the air terminal. I could pick the air terminal first if I want. It really doesn't matter. The software still knows what to do as I am connecting those two components together. So there you go. Again, without running any commands or having to know anything new about AutoCAD, all I have to do is click on point A and click on point B, and the software adds the duct, all the transitions, and all the fittings that are required to make those connections. Lastly, let's put an end cap on this open end here. This I'll use the tool palettes for. I'm going to go to the Fittings tab and then choose End Cap. And then we'll pick on the end of the duct here. And that end cap is now in place. Notice that all I had to do was run the command. I didn't even have to pick the size or the shape of that end cap. It inherits its properties from the duct that you select, and it places itself accordingly. So let's take a look at that in 3D and see what we have. I do like to use one of the shaded visual styles, whether it be realistic or something with less resolution. That way I can see what this looks like in real life. Also have a good look at how it's going to appear against the the architectural models that we're using as a backdrop here. So there you go. Since I was working in a 2D view, I didn't have to concern myself with elevation or positioning of my duct, it was inherited from the components that were already there. So it is very intelligent and parametric. If I wanted to, I could continue to route ducts, maybe connect up the VAV boxes to the main runs here, which ultimately go to the riser. I could also add some equipment. So we'll do one of those next. I could copy in VAV box if I was using more of those. That I can use AutoCAD's regular copy command to do that. I could also use the tool palette on the equipment tab to add equipment. You can also do it from the ribbon. There is an equipment drop down, and I could choose to add another VAV unit if I want. I'll select the style from the list here and then choose the size I want from the drop down. And right here is where I would control the elevation of that. This is what will keep me from having to move things with AutoCAD's traditional commands after I place them. So I can set the elevation, and then I can place the VAV box where I need to. And since it is a piece of equipment, MEP is prompting me to set the rotation of that as I place it. Again, it's an all-in-one command, and I don't have to do any work after the fact. And that's how we place equipment with AutoCAD MEP. Of course, I can move it if I need to with AutoCAD's traditional modify commands. If all I'm doing is setting the rotation and the elevation, I can do that from properties right here. So if I set it at the wrong rotation, I can change it from the properties palette along with the elevation. Okay, so that's a little intro on how you can use MEP to route duct. Next, let's take a look at some of the electrical features. So we'll use the Project Navigator to open one of the power drawings here. This drawing contains the receptacles and the wiring, and we'll also use this to hook up to some of the panels that are part of the project. Now before I start working in this drawing, I am going to change to a different workspace. As you can see here, I'm still looking at the mechanical tools. Since I'm switching disciplines, I can switch to the electrical workspace here with the workspace switcher. That will suppress the mechanical tools and turn on all of the electrical tools. So now I can add the receptacles, I can add lighting for a ceiling plan, I can add switches, we've got junction boxes. We also have some tools for doing things like network drops and other communication devices. Here's the panels that we can add to the project, wires, and so on. So what I'm going to do here is we're just going to lay out the receptacles and the wiring for Office C. So I'll just add a good old duplex receptacle. Now since we are leveraging the models that were done in AutoCAD architecture, there's some rooms in here, and as soon as I start hovering inside a room, MEP wants to place all of the receptacles I need for that room. These are controlled by properties and the number of devices right now. And so wherever I pick, I'm going to wind up with 10 receptacles, and they're going to be evenly spaced. Over here in Office C, that's probably too many, so I'm going to come over to Properties and change the number of devices down to 4 so it matches the office next door. Now just hover along the wall and click to place those receptacles. So it doesn't matter whether I have 4 receptacles or 50 receptacles, I can place all of the receptacles for that room in one command. Next, I'm going to select these 4 receptacles and add some information to them. As you can see in Properties, here's the style we're using. We can also see the system that they belong to, so we can set that from Properties. We also have the electrical properties here, so let's look at that. For the electrical properties, we want to add the load that's required for those receptacles. I'm going to use 180, which is pretty common for this type of receptacle. While I'm here, you can also assign these to a panel. This panel is already part of the project. However, it's not in this drawing, which is a real nice feature of MEP, because I can tell these receptacles which panel they're connected to, but it doesn't matter where the panel is in the project. And I'll show you which drawing it's in just a moment. Right now, all we're doing is telling the receptacles that they're going to be connected to panel LP1. While I'm at it, we'll assign them to a circuit, and I'll use one that's not being used right now. So I'll use circuit number 8 here. And notice as soon as I assign them to a circuit, the total load for that circuit is automatically calculated. Okay, so that'll take care of those receptacles and their loads. Next, let's add their wires. I'm going to come over to the tool palettes again and switch to the wire tab, and I'll do an arc wire. In properties, we have control over the style of wire that we need to use. Down at the bottom under design data, here you can see the panel that I assigned them to, as well as the circuit. Now, if I wanted to, I could draw these wires in just like I would draw lines, one line at a time. That might take a while if you have a lot of receptacles in that particular room or on that circuit. Instead, I'm going to come down to the options on the command line, and I'm going to use the generate option. As soon as I use generate, all of the wires needed for those receptacles on that circuit are added all at once. So again, it doesn't matter if I have 4 or if I have 50, I can do all of the wires in one click. And that's got to save you some time when you're running wires. While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and add a home run. So I'll pick one of the receptacles here and place the home run. So in very few clicks, you can add a very large amount of objects to your drawing. Now, as I said, when we were looking at the electrical properties, the panels aren't in this drawing. They would be in the electrical room, but as you can see, they're not here. They are actually in another drawing. So we'll take a look at that one. That drawing is my electrical drawing. So there is panel LP1 in the electrical room. It's hooked up to the transformer here, which is then connected to the wet transformer outside, along with the conduit. There's some cable tray in here. But that's the nice thing about MEP is we don't have to have everything in one massive drawing. We can have our panels and our transformers in one drawing. We can have our wiring in another drawing and let the database control the data, connecting it all together. The last feature I'd like to highlight here today is how we can display the drawings using the display manager in AutoCAD MEP. So now if you are working with layers a lot, and I'm the type, I feel like I'm a big fan of layers. I like using them, but sometimes I layer myself to death when I have a larger project. And I bet you some of you feel the same way. And I don't want to spend too much time turning this layer on and that layer off and setting all the settings that go with all the layers that we have to use. The display manager in MEP allows us to use a very intelligent style that will control that for us. So for example, if I wanted this drawing here to be of single line fashion, then I can just choose a style and then the software takes care of the rest. It hides the elements that don't need to be seen, turns those layers off, and it also takes care of single line versus double line display if that's what I want. And that's all done with the display manager. And there's plenty to choose from. You have control over these, so you can set them up however you want just by clicking, but it's a single click versus having to select a bunch of layers and then control them the old-fashioned way. Here's a presentation version of the drawing. If I wanted to show everything, I could use the standard display. Of course, this makes my eyes hurt when I look at it. There's some ceiling information here and probably too much information, but I did just want to show that to you. Here, I'll switch it back to the original. So you have that that you can use to help with your productivity when you're setting up your views to get ready for drawings and get them printed and things like that. So we took a look at how we can use MEP to route duct very quickly, make all the connections. We also looked at how to create our receptacles and add our wires very quickly. And we also looked at how we can display each of our views based on your project needs. Okay, so that's it for AutoCAD MEP today. Next, I'd like to share with you some of our resources. On our YouTube page, you'll find the recordings for all of our webcasts. We have some brand new ones that have been done recently. The first one was What's New in AutoCAD 2019. You'll find that up there. We've also had one on the architecture tool set, the electrical tool set. We've also got one for our Plant 3D tool set. Of course, after today, you'll be able to go back and watch this one for the MEP tool set. And coming up soon, we're going to have one for the mechanical and the MEP 3D tool set. So make sure you check back on those. Plus, we've got plenty of resources on our blog at hagerman.com. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I hope it was beneficial for you. Please remember to complete the survey when we're done. Now let's open the floor for questions.
And so far we haven't had any questions, but we'll give everybody a little bit of time here in case somebody wants to ask some. Just a little touch base on the MEP also. Due to the length of time we have scheduled today, we were not able to cover piping and plumbing and things like that, adding the cable tray conduit. It all works pretty much the same way, though. You add a pipe the same way we added duct. You add cable tray and conduit the same way we added duct. So there's a lot of similarity. We didn't show a lighting plan, but it's going to be very similar also. But if there are any questions, we'll take a moment here to answer them. This has been a pretty quiet group. So while we're waiting here for a second, one other little tidbit. If you want to know more about the projects and how they're set up, that was covered in the architecture tool set with the project manager. How do you unhide? Okay, I'll let you show that if you have that on your screen still, Brett, but where you did the isolate to hide the objects.
Yeah, let's go back to that. I did. Yeah, I finished routing the duct and I did not unhide. Yeah, so that is a basic AutoCAD feature. So when you have hidden objects like that, just out in the open, make sure you have nothing selected. You can right-click your mouse to get into the mouse menu, go back to Isolate Objects, and then End Object Isolation. That's the method I normally use. If you are the keyboard type of user, the command is unisolate objects if you are typing your commands.
So it's very similar to turning layers on and off, but you're doing it by object instead. And that's an AutoCAD feature. So you can do that not just in MEP, but in regular AutoCAD.
Right. The reason I use that method is all these terminals here, the ones I hid, are on the same layer as the rest of the air terminals. So if I were to use freeze or hide those, I would have hid everything, which means I wouldn't have been able to touch the terminals I was after. So instead of that, that's why I used hide and isolate the objects. That way I could keep the layers active. Go and bring those back there.
And another thing in this particular drawing, just the display setting he's on isn't showing the ceiling grids, but there are other display settings where you could actually see the ceiling grids and where those diffusers are actually placed inside the ceiling grid. The next question is there a way to overlay multiple plans at the same time for coordination? And that would be through XREFs. So you could actually do that with the XREFs and everything. Where did you change the tool palette?
The tool
I'm not sure.
I changed just by using the workspace switcher. The way MEP is set up out of the box, you're given a handful of workspaces, one for HVAC, one for piping, one for plumbing, one for architecture, etc. I've got my version of these up here, which are kind of the same thing. Just might have, something turned off that I wasn't using today. But that's where you do it, is by using the workspace switcher. That's down on the status bar, and it's the icon that looks like a gear. That's part of basic AutoCAD. And so once you change your workspace, it changes out your ribbon and any tool palettes that go with it.
Okay. And there's tool palettes for each discipline. There's one for plumbing, there's one for piping, there's one for HVAC and electrical. And also on the electrical, while we're doing, we talked about he talked about the wires and setting up those on the circuit, and it was calculating loads. There's a circuit manager built into the system also, to where you can actually look at your circuits and see overloads and things like that.
Yeah, and let me show you something about the circuit manager. There's a great feature, one I like, in case I accidentally overload a circuit. It'd be nice to know that before the drawings go out. So if I go back to the power drawing, I'll select one of those receptacles, and I can open the circuit manager, and I can look at all of the circuit data for the project as well as what's in this drawing. So here's that panel that we were hooking up to. If I wanted to drill a little deeper, I could select one of the circuits and filter down and just look at that. All that data that I need in there is visible. The number of poles, the voltage, the types of wires that are on it. It's all part of the circuit manager. Now, let me pretend for a minute and overload this circuit. So I'll pick this receptacle here, and I'll go into the electrical properties, and I'll fat finger it. I'll pretend that I entered 1800 instead of 180. And as soon as you do that, the circuit manager will highlight that circuit in red, so you'll be able to see which circuits are overloaded. And we can fix those before we send the drawings out. So that's another great feature of the circuit manager. Let me fix that one. I'll set that back to 180, and as soon as I do that, then the circuit manager is happy again. And you'll find the circuit manager. Keep that from docking here. I kind of like that to float. There we go. All you got to do is select on an electrical component, and then you'll find the circuit manager up in the ribbon.
While we wait a second or two here and see if there are any more questions, why don't you open up a piping drawing just to let them see that?
All right. How about this one? Let's do the fire protection one. Piping is drawn in the same way as duct is, as well as conduit, cable tray. The behavior is the exact same for all those different components in MEP. So here's an example of some of the piping. Looks like it's in single line display right now.
Well, that's a setting that would control that where if it's below 4 inches is what this particular project is set to. It shows single line pipe, but you can see up in the mechanical room it's showing double line for anything over 4 inches.
Yeah.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, one just happened in. Is there a shortcut to tagging CFMs for diffusers? Actually, there is. When you're tagging them, you would do that, like I said, in the architectural tool set, they showed how to do the different constructs and views of the project manager. You would do that in a view in the project manager. You create one. And when you tag one diffuser, the first one, you have an option afterwards for multiple. And however you tag that first one, you can do the entire drawing of all the diffusers in that drawing. So it'll place them in the same location. So if you place them at the very bottom right, for instance, of a diffuser, it would place them on the bottom right of every diffuser in that drawing, all in one command. So you use the first one you tag it with, and this could be diffusers. It could be home run arrows, tags on home run arrows. There's all kinds of tags that you can use. And once you tag the first one, you then hit multiple, select all of them in the drawing, and it'll go through and tag them all. So it's a multiple command for all of them. If I already have a floor plan created in standard AutoCAD, can I load the MEP toolpath into the standard CAD to access it, or do I have to open the file in MEP altogether? You can use a drawing that was created in, maybe you received from your architect a 2D drawing of the floor plan. You can place it in there. It's just when you go to a 3D view, you will only see it as 2D. But you can draw your MEP on top of that at the correct elevations and everything to where it looks correct in plan view, but you get the correct data for length of duct and length of wires and stuff like that by using the 3D features in here. You could also have an architectural drawing that you pulled in from Revit that was an output from Revit and put it as a background, also as an XREF. When you have the 2D drawing from AutoCAD or the Revit drawing, AutoCAD architecture doesn't have the intelligence of those rooms. So things like when he was doing the outlets around Office C would not work, because there's no architectural space there for it to find the room boundaries. So you'd lose some features, but for the most part, it will work without any issues.
Right, you would have to add the rooms back in on the architect.
Right, right. To add wire cable management, I'm not sure what you're asking there. If you want to give me a little bit more information to what you mean by that. Because you can add the wires we saw there in the outlets. You can do that also on the lights. Cable management, that was part of the last question, sorry. Okay.
Oh, to access standard CAD, to access it, to add wire cable management. Got it, okay. Yeah, so you answered that one. All right, I don't see any new questions coming in.
Ready for you, Ashley.
Okay. This will conclude our broadcast. If you think of additional questions later, you can simply reply to the confirmation or reminder email you received from GoToWebinar. We can get those to Brett or Rick or whoever to get your questions answered. Once again, if you could take a few moments to fill out the short survey, we would appreciate it. It will just pop up as we close down today. And thanks for attending today's webcast, and have a great day, everybody.